Good day, my dear students. And now we're on the second meeting of our asynchronous class in Cell and Molecular Biology, or Sci 3217. So in this discussion, we will be talking about the mitochondria and the chloroplast. Since we're already done with the organelles involved in the endomembrane system, and now we will move on to the powerhouse of the cell, yes, of course, and the site for photosynthesis, in which all energy transformations are happening in these two organelles. So allow me to share my screen. Wait lang. Ayan. Chloroplast, pero maliit yung S. Sige na lang. So, now we will be starting our discussion about the mitochondria and the chloroplasts. So, mitochondrion is the singular, di ba, term for these organelle. And then mitochondria is the plural. And then chloroplast, if it has no S at the end of it, then singular. And then chloroplasts is plural. Okay, let's just move on. So, it was actually believed that the mitochondrion and the chloroplast came from a prokaryotic bacterium. So, meaning, at first daw, these are free-living bacteria. And then they were just engulfed by a bigger eukaryotic na microorganism forming eukaryotic forming what we have now, the modern na eukaryotic cell. Okay, so why do we say that the mitochondrion and the chloroplast came from their ancestral bacteria? So as you can see here in the colored sections, wait lang ha, I'll just open the laser pointer. These red sections here in the mitochondrion and the green sections here in the chloroplast and the brown section here in the bacterium are actually sites of energy transformations. So meaning dinhi mahitabo ang pag-exchange sa ATP, o paghimo sa ATP, or dili gani pag asay pangana pag breakdown sa ATP kay para for example makakuha ka og energy or dili gani maka-form ka og carbohydrates. Aside from that, both or the bacterium, the mitochondrion, and the chloroplast have these three have inner membrane and outer membrane. So yun daw yung parang similarity nila. And these are structurally similar. So meaning, yung components ng inner membrane and outer membrane of the bacterium is parang kapareho doon sa mitochondrion and the chloroplast. So ano yung similarity nila? So that presence of inner and outer membrane, and number 3, the sites of energy transformations. So, pangalan yan, in the bacterium, it happens here in the inner membrane, kung asa mag-agi-agi itong in the chemiosmosis. And then sa mitochondrion, dinhi siya mahitabo sa cristae, these foldings, and then sa chloroplast, dinhi sa thylakoid membranes. Okay, so how was the pangalan yan? How was the mitochondrion embedded into this pangalan yan, ancestral kibali nga nga cell? Okay. So it was believed that Anaerobic, so when you say aerobic, it needs oxygen, di ba? In order to, pangalan yan, um, to transform or get energy. So, kailangan niya ng oxygen. So, an aerobic bacteria daw was engulfed, yan, by an ancestral cell. And then when it was engulfed, they made an endosymbiotic relationship. So when you say endosymbiotic relationship, wa siya gikaon, wa gi-degrade ang imong aerobic bacterium. Instead, ang imong aerobic bacterium, naa na siya interactions with that ancestral na cell in which mutabang na siya sa katong ancestral na cell in a sense na it gives the cell the energy, and then the ancestral cell in return houses it or protects it, something like that. So when you say endosymbiotic relationship, so it's like a mutualistic na relationship pero nasa loob siya. So symbiosis, inside endo, symbiosis. Yes, parang working together. Okay. And then after some time, nahimo na ni siya nga aerobic, di ba? Na ancestral cell. So, this is the eukaryote na. Kay, makailan ta nga eukaryote, di ba? Kay, it has a nucleus. Kani siya. Ancestral na eukaryote, this one. Na naa na siya, pangalan yan, mitochondrion. So, ang imong bacterium, aerobic na bacterium, naghimo na turn na siya into a mitochondrion. And then, after some time, ning engulf na pod ang imong ancestral eukaryotic cell with another na pod nga prokaryote, which is a photosynthetic one. So when you say photosynthetic one, it can be able to harness the energy of sunlight and just use oxygen, carbon dioxide in order to form carbohydrates, di ba? And also release oxygen. Yan, photosynthetic na siya. Through endosymbiosis pa rin. So, ijang gikaon, pero instead of degrading it or breaking it down, this this photosynthetic prokaryote happened to work with that ancestral eukaryote by giving it food, which is in the form of carbohydrates. Yan. And this is now the beginning of the formation of the higher order na mga pangalan, photosynthetic eukaryotes. Yan, di ba? So as you can see from an ancestral eukaryote, which is this, nahimo siyang aerobic na eukaryote, which is pangalan, mao ni siya ang atong always nga makitaan sa, like for example sa mga animals, di ba? Makunin ni siya ang gigikanan or origin sa mga animal cells, and then later on becomes a photosynthetic na eukaryotic cell, which is an example ani in which this is an origin of the plant cells. Yeah. So first, we will discuss the mitochondrion. So, as you can see, it has two membranes, diba? The outer membrane and the inner membrane. And the inside of it is, pangalan, has a gel-like consistency. So, we are always familiar, diba, with the function of the mitochondrion, in which we call it as the powerhouse of the cell, because it produces the ATP that is needed by the cell, because it is the energy currency of all living things. So the mitochondria is a membrane-bounded organelle. So when you say membrane-bounded, membrane. Double membrane pagani. We have the inner membrane and the outer membrane. So its size is about the size of a bacterium. which has a diameter of 0.5 to 1.0 micrometer. And it occupies up to 20% of the cytoplasmic volume. So, unsa man di ay ang activities sa mitochondria? It actually carries out oxidative phosphorylation and produces most of the ATP in eukaryotic cells. So when you say oxidative phosphorylation, you need oxygen to make ATP. Attach that pangalan yan. Attach that one phosphate group to the ADP through the usage of pangalan yan. The electrons from the NADH and FADH2, in which you will learn in the pangalan yan, mechanisms of aerobic respiration in the next lesson. Okay. So, unsa man ang shape and location sa mitochondria? So, it actually comes in different shapes and sizes, and it can also rapidly change in shape. It is generally located where energy consumption is highest in the cell. So, asa man nga parte sa lawas ang high og energy consumption? Of course, di ba? Sa muscle, di ba? Sa heart, or dili gani sa brain. There are a lot of things actually. A lot of ano. So, like for example, in sperm cells, in which it needs to be motile, di ba? Para makaswim siya towards the egg cell, it just has fewer than 100 mitochondria. While kidney cells, they just have also bigger or higher number of mitochondria than the sperm cell. So it has less than 1,000 mitochondria. Then the liver cells, meron siyang several thousand mitochondria. And of course, prokaryotic cells. So when you say prokaryotic, they don't have any membrane-bound organelles, and the mitochondrion is a membrane-bound organelle. So of course, they don't have any mitochondria in their components. So, what are the types of cells or parts of the cell na kanang daghan og mga mitochondria? So, of course, the muscle, then the tail of the sperm cell, and then the flagella. Ay, sorry. Back ko pala. Traditionally, we only think of the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. So meaning, ang iya lang gayong function is for energy production through aerobic respiration. But actually, there are still other functions of the mitochondria. So the others are first through signaling. Like for example, for example, sa mitosis and meiosis, in which kinahanglan nimo i-divide ang imong number of mitochondria in each of the daughter cells. So, mao nang needed sila for the signaling on the start of the mitosis. And then, of course, in the apoptosis. So, when you say apoptosis, this means that the cell undergoes programmed cell death. So, naadjay time na after the cell is able to produce lots and lots of copies of its own, and now it's time for it to, just rest and die in its right time. So that's why it's called programmed cell death. So ang himuon lang actually ani sa mitochondria is that it will burst out. And since the mitochondria has a lot of enzymes that can also degrade other components of the cell if it bursts out, so mamatay ang imong cell when the mitochondria bursts out. Okay. When the components of the mitochondria comes out. Um, so there are different structures of the mitochondrion. Again, it is a double membrane organelle. It has the inner membrane and the outer membrane. So as you can see, this is the outer membrane, this one, the black one, and then the inner membrane, yeah, inner boundary membrane, this, the gray one, and in this part, I'll just charge my laptop. And then in this part, ito siya yung, yan, the medyo thin lang siya na white one. And then it also has the crista. Crista is the singular, and then cristae, so meaning plural na siya. Crista is the inner foldings. So ang imong inner membrane dili siya smooth, naa siya folds. And then those inner foldings are called as cristae. And then the matrix, so nakay outer membrane and then inner membrane, and then inside the inner membrane is called as the matrix. This one. Wait. Yan, hindi, walang ano dito. This one, the matrix. Ayan, this matrix. Okay. So let's discuss these structures one by one. First, the inner and the outer membranes. Let's look at the outermost membrane, which is the outer mitochondrial membrane. So the outer mitochondrial membrane is actually just a simple phospholipid bilayer. So meaning, this is actually similar to the cell membrane, diba? Just a phospholipid bilayer. But ang difference nila is that it has porins, or like parang buho, protein structures nga buho siya, which are permeable to molecules or smallest proteins. So what are some substances that can get into the porins? So these are the ions, nutrient molecules, so like for example, pyruvate, ATP, ADP, and others. So because the porins cannot close, meaning the space between the inner membrane and the outer membrane and the cytosol, which is the space outside, diba? Outside the mitochondrion, just has the same pH and components. Kaya makasunod raman. So relatively similar lang sila og kanang components. How about the inner mitochondrial membrane? So unlike the outer mitochondrial membrane, which is just so permeable, the inner mitochondrial membrane is more restricted when it comes to permeability. Only oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water can come and go out of the inner mitochondrial membrane. Of course, the oxygen and diba? Wait lang, oxygen and water. Tama? Oh, I did. Oxygen and ano na ito? Of course, the oxygen and the pyruvate, pangalan niyan, is needed for the Krebs cycle, which is pyruvate nga himuon nga acetyl-CoA pa dito. Basta, dyan na nang ma-learn ni ka. Next na po na itong lesson. Will be used in the TCA or the Krebs cycle inside the matrix of the mitochondrion. That's why it can, enter the inner mitochondrial membrane. And then, of course, in aerobic respiration, aerobic, you need oxygen, and the pangalan yan, byproduct of it is carbon dioxide, meaning carbon dioxide can just pass through the inner mitochondrial membrane. So mga maliliit lang talaga na molecules ang makakapass through. This inner mitochondrial membrane is also highly complex, diba? Unlike the outer mitochondrial membrane, nga naros sa buho, porins, nga na. Kani pong inner mitochondrial membrane, this is embedded with a lot of protein, pangalan niya, sa term, protein molecules, transport proteins yon. Transport proteins, ATP synthase, ATP synthase, and complexes of the electron transport chain. So kani siya nga mga proteins are actually involved in the production of ATP nga inyong makita in the next na mga discussion. So imagine from carbohydrate, and then magkuha ka dito o ka ng imo patong gugon to imong carbohydrate, glucose usually, mahimo to siyang pyruvate, and then mahimong acetyl-CoA, and then acetyl-CoA, gamiton to siya, magbalik-balik na to siya sa cycle para makaproduce ka og NADH and FADH2. Tapos katong nga FADH2 and NADH, gamiton to siya para maka-move ka sa imong electrons dinhi sa electron transport system or transport chain in the pangalan inner mitochondrial membrane. Tapos maka-generate ka adto og chemiosmosis or like hydrogen nga gradient, H plus gradient, para makaproduce ka og ATP molecules. 32 ATP molecules ata yun. Okay. And then the ATP synthase, of course, produces the ATP, which is again, the energy currency of the cell. Okay, so of course, in between the inner membrane and the outer membrane, we have the intermembrane space. It is just a tiny compartment of the cell enclosed by the outer and inner membrane. And pangalan yan, just like what I said kanina, it just has similar components to the cytosol with respect to the small molecules. Only small molecules, dili na sa mga bigger molecules. Because nga, it has the outer membrane has porins that can let these small molecules pass through it. Then we also have cristae or crista. These are the folds of the mitochondrial inner membrane. So aside from being the pangalan yan, the location where the synthase enzymes, complexes of the electron transport chain are found, the function of cristae also is to increase the surface area of the inner membrane. Kay kung ingon ra ang inner membrane, gamay ra ang pangalan yan, ang iyang ma-house nga mga proteins or membrane proteins or complexes. So kung gamay ra imong ma-house nga mga membrane proteins, synthase, and complexes, so gamay ra pud ang imong ma-produce, di ba, nga ATP. So mo na kinahanglan mo fold siya to the inside para daghan daghan pud iyang ma-house. And aside from that, kani pud siya nga foldings are necessary for the chemiosmosis or the H plus na gradient nga inyong makit-an in the next na mga lessons. So mao ni ang imong mitochondria again. Again, this is the outer membrane, kani siya. And then this is the inner membrane. And then these foldings, kani siya, diba? Nag-fold siya. Mo ni gitawag nga cristae. So what is the function of the crista? It is actually the site of electron transport chain and chemiosmosis. So asa ba tong crista dinhi? Kana diha. So, dinhi ipasa-pasa ang imong electrons which pumps the protons to produce the molecule of ATP. So without the crystal, dili ka makaproduce og kanang ATP kay you need lots and lots and lots of protons para makahimo ka og gradient. Tapos murag dugay na siya may tabo. So mo na kinahanglan mo fold ni siya. Then okay, tapos na ta din sa outer membrane, intermembrane space, then inner membrane. Then now let's move on to the space inside the inner membrane, which is the matrix. So again, it has a gel-like consistency. It is dense and viscous. And then it is also more viscous than the cell cytoplasm because it contains less water. So the function of the matrix is that it is the site or the location of the citric acid cycle. So in the next lesson, you will see the pangalan yan? You will see the importance of the citric acid cycle. Pero actually, gitawag ni siya citric acid cycle kay citric acid manggod ang iyang murag precursor para magbalik-balik siya sa cycle, something like that. And then, ano sa to? Napakuyin mo na to. Ang kanidi ang citric acid cycle, pwede na siya matawag as the first or second step of aerobic respiration. So, pwede nimo matawag na first step of aerobic respiration tong glycolysis if O2 is available, di ba? To, pangalan yan, to cut the carbohydrate or the glucose. Pero if not, so, mo ba nang gingon? If not, then makaproduce ka og lactic acid. And then, after sa glycolysis, muna ni siya ang citric acid cycle. So, what makes matrix so unique is that it contains its own genetic material, DNA, tRNA, ribosomes, and granules of ions. Yan. So, as you can see here, merong own DNA actually, ang mitochondria. That is the reason why, pangalan yan, kinahanglan nimo i-divide ang imong mitochondria sa imong mitosis. Nga dapat ang usa nimo ka daughter cell na ay mitochondria and the other daughter cell na apod si its own share of mitochondria. Kay dili ta actually makahimo og may pangalan yan some synthesis of the mitochondrion without this DNA. Also, it has its own ribosomes, diba? So, that is, ang gamit ani niya is to make its own protein complexes or protein synthesis. So, like for example, asa ba ni siya? Ako bang gipakita din? Yan. For example here, na kaning mga circle mo ni siya ang DNA sa mitochondrion. And then, these kanang circles nga medyo gray to black, these are the ribosomes. And then these circles nga white, these are the ATP synthase particles. So the ATP synthase is actually the protein that say pangalan na say term installs produces na lang or makes the ATP whole. Tapos, so kibali kani sila nga mga particles mao ni mga precursors para makahimo ka sa imong ATP synthase. Okay? So kani siya nga DNA sa mitochondrion, wala need siya makita sa imong genomic nga DNA, di ba? Lahi ni siya sa imong genomic nga DNA. Another function of the matrix is that it performs the process of aerobic respiration, which is the citric acid cycle. Ayan. Ako na ning giingon kanina. And now, let's move on to the chloroplast. So this is the structure of the chloroplast. Later, we will discuss the different components of the chloroplast. So according to, studies, scientists believe that the cyanobacteria, it is like, the present, they can still be presently found now. These are, pangalan yan, green pigmented na mga bacteria. They are the origin daw of the chloroplast. So, dinhi kunugikan ang mga chloroplast. Nganong nakaingon man sila nga nga kaning cyanobacteria man kuno ang gigikanan sa chloroplast. This is because they have a lot of similarities. They have the same outer membrane, the same inner membrane, similar nucleoid or DNA, di ba? Just like the mitochondrion, the chloroplast also has its own set of DNA. They have thylakoid membranes. They also have ribosomes. So daghan sila, di ba? O kaparehasan. And also, when it comes to pangalan yan, basic function, in which the chloroplast is the site for photosynthesis. The cyanobacterium can also photosynthesize. It just uses the electrons from water and the energy of sunlight to convert atmospheric carbon dioxide to organic compounds through the process of carbon fixation. So, pareho silang maka-photosynthesize in the same, pangalan yan, membranes. Okay. So, of course, our, pangalan yan, the focus of this discussion is the chloroplast. But first, let's take a look at how chloroplast is actually formed in the cell. So it is said that chloroplast belongs to a family of plastids. So when you say plastids, these are the organelles that are grouped because they are enclosed in an envelope composed of two concentric membranes. Concentric. So pareho, di ba? O kanang kasi pangalan o forma or shape, pero pangalan usa smaller, nga na. Concentric. So, dili apil ang mitochondria, kay ang mitochondria, ingon-ingon ba yato siya? Naa siya'y cristae. And then, all of the plastids are derived from proplastids. Yan, this one. Proplastids are actually small organelles in immature cells of plant meristems. So makitaan ko na ning proplastids sa kanang mga udlot-udlot, sa kung asa mo tubo ang imong plant cell or plant tissues, yan, something like that. And then kaning proplastids, they either become ethioplasts or pangalan yan, in the presence of sunlight, they become chloroplast or leucoplast. Yes. So when you say ethioplast, these are the plastids that develop when a leaf is grown in darkness. Pangalan yan, di ba kung imong ibutang sa sa dark nga area ang imong plant, mura siyag malaya and then mo turn into yellow because it has a semi-crystalline array nga mag-produce og yellow nga chlorophyll precursor. But the minute or like after some time that you take it out of the darkness and then put it in direct sunlight, the ethioplast will just become chloroplasts. So chloroplasts because they have green pigments. And then, if it does not become a chloroplast, then it may become a chromoplast. So all the other pigments that you can see in the leaf of the plant that is not green, they are chromoplasts. So like for example, sa ba ng San Francisco ba na nga leaf? So those are chromoplasts, yung mga yellow-yellow. Okay. What about leucoplasts? So if the chromoplast and the chloroplasts have pigments, the leucoplasts have different na mga pangalan niya, function. So they are actually found in epidermal and internal tissues of the plant, and they do not become green and photosynthetic. Instead, they house or store different kinds of molecules, such as, like for example, the amyloplast, in which we have observed, di ba, in the potato cells. So these amyloplasts accumulate starch inside of it. Okay? How about eleoplast? The eleoplast, pangalan yan, stores esters ba to or ethers? So, esters ata yun. And then the proteinoplast, of course, they store proteins. Yeah. So what are the uses of plastids? Of course, one of the forms of plastid is chloroplast, and chloroplast is the site for photosynthesis. In addition, it can also be a site for storage, di ba? So kung asa ka mag-store sa imong materials. And then they can also be used to compartmentalize intermediary metabolism. So like for example, purine, pyrimidine synthesis. So, di ba, purine and pyrimidine kay sa imong, ansaman to, sa, pangalan yan, nitrogenous bases, di ba, ang ATCG. So, yes, purine and pyrimidine. And then most amino acid synthesis and all fatty acid synthesis, di ba? So, ang gamit sa eleoplast, kay mag-store sa daan sa katong mga esters, and then sa katong proteinoplast, mag-store sa daan sa katong mga amino acids or proteins. Yan. So, this is the structure of the chloroplast. So, as you can see here, this is the mitochondrion and this is the chloroplast. So, they actually have the same components, but in addition, yung the chloroplast has an extra compartment. So, similar sila na may outer membrane, and then similar na may inner membrane, similar na may intermembrane space, and then, pangalan yan, similar na may DNA, similar na may ribosomes, but ang chloroplast, meron siyang additional na membrane, which is the thylakoid membrane. And then, instead of ang pangan sa matrix dinhi sa mitochondria, ang dinhi pod sa chloroplast, it is called as stroma. Yan. Both has its own genome and genetic system. Unsa may kalahian sa mitochondria and chloroplasts? So, of course, the inner membrane of the chloroplast is just soft, di ba? It is not folded into cristae, and it does not contain any electron transport chain proteins. So, ano na dyan siya? Like, plain lang siya nga inner membrane. And then the ETC, photosynthetic light capturing systems, and the ATP synthase, diba? Sa mitochondrion na siya sa cristae foldings of the inner membrane, pero sa chloroplast, makitaan siya sa thylakoid membrane. So again, naa sa second membrane, makitaan ang mga daghang mga membrane proteins, complexes, ATP synthase sa mitochondria. Sa third membrane, which is the thylakoid membrane, dinhi makita ang kalisiya nga mga complexes. If you zoom in one thylakoid membrane, this is what you can see. So this is the thylakoid membrane, and then inside is the thylakoid space. The thylakoid membrane is actually the third distinct membrane that forms a set of flattened disc-like sacs. So, mura siya ingon gipang ano, unsay pangalan na? Um, gipang patong-patong nga mga ano, mura siya og pancake, something like that. Then the thylakoid space is the third internal compartment, di ba? So, again, ang sa ano, ang spaces sa mitochondria kay ano ra, intermembrane space o matrix. Pero ang sa chloroplast naa siya'y intermembrane space, na siya'y stroma, plus napag siya'y thylakoid space. By the interconnection of the lumen of each thylakoid, it is separated by the thylakoid membrane from the stroma. And then, a stack, so patong-patong ng mga thylakoids, this is called as the granum. One stack is granum. And then lots of stack, so this is grana. So plural. Of course, the function of the chloroplast is photosynthesis. But there are two reactions that are happening in photosynthesis. So first is the photosynthetic electron transfer or the light reactions. It needs sunlight for it to occur. And the carbon fixation reactions or the dark reactions in which hindi masyadong need ang sunlight. So the chlorophyll obtains electrons from the water through the usage of pangalan yan, through the excitation of the photosystems using the protons in the sunlight. Yes, para magguba to siya tong ano water molecule makakuha ka og electron, producing pangalan yan oxygen as the byproduct. All of these reactions are confined to the chloroplast. While the carbon fixation reaction, it begins in the chloroplast stroma and continue in the cytosol. This reaction produces sucrose or glucose and many other organic molecules in the leaves of the plant. Okay. What happens if there is actually low carbon dioxide concentration? This is usually rampant in pangalan yan. Very arid or like, hindi naman arid pala, sorry. Hot conditions. When it is hot kasi, it's hard to capture carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide disperses, something like that. Yes. So what happens kung low lang ang carbon dioxide concentration? Ayan, kaya pala siya nagiging low ang carbon dioxide concentration is that when it's hot, the stomata, the openings of the leaves where the carbon dioxide enters, they close in order to prevent the excessive evaporation of water. So when it's closed, then the carbon dioxide also cannot come into the cells of the plant. So anong mangyayari kung pangalan yan? Kung hindi makakapasok yung carbon dioxide. So, low yung concentration ng carbon dioxide inside the leaf tissue. So, what happens is it undergoes photorespiration. Of course, the byproduct of photosynthesis is oxygen. And the oxygen has an affinity to rubisco or ribulose by kalimot na ko. Yes, mo na to. Basta rubisco, which is involved in the usage of carbon dioxide to form the, pangalan yan, 3 carbon molecule which will be used. Yeah, diretso na to. Basta sa next na siyang nga discussion. And then, after adto niya, makaproduce ka og oxygen in the end, ay nakay kaning rubisco naapod si affinity towards oxygen. So kung gamay ra ang carbon dioxide, nagsige ra kag himo, release og oxygen. So ang mahitabo, ang tendency is that the Robisco, the oxygen binds with the Robisco. And instead of forming ang pangalan niyan, carbohydrate na result or pangalan yan, glucose or sucrose na result, dili na mao ang imong mahimo, di ba? Instead, carbon, yes. So, a respiratory process in higher plants in which they take up oxygen, yan, in the light and give out some carbon dioxide, contrary to the general patterns of photosynthesis. So, imong sir oxygen, mas mong ano carbon dioxide, tas mura to yung himuon. So, sayang ang energy, ang ATP nga ang imong nagamit ana, kibali. So, it is a serious liability for plants in hot and dry conditions. Because nag-close up na yung stomata mo, kaya nag-decrease yung carbon dioxide levels mo, favoring photorespiration. So, photo, di ba? Light, respiration, di ba? Ang respire, it needs oxygen, and then ang iyang result, carbon dioxide. Pero actually, murang magbalik-balik ra na siya. Tapos like, masayang lang jud ang imong ATP. So, what are some special adaptations in other plants? Pangalan, this is the reason why some plants are just pangalan or can tolerate hot conditions while other plants cannot, because their photosynthetic capability is hampered if it is too hot, di ba? Or if there is low carbon dioxide concentration. So, carbon fixation cycle occurs only in the chloroplasts of specialized bundle sheath cells. So unlike sa mga pangalan ni common ng mga plants that we see in our, environment, the evergreen plants nga dito ra sa imong mga mesophyll cells. Yes. As long as they chloroplast, halos sige mag-ano na siya. Dinhi sa these types of plants, they have specialized bundle sheath cells in which didto ra mahitabo ang carbon fixation. I mean, carbon fixation. Di ba na ay two stages ang photosynthesis, ang light reactions and the dark reactions. Dark reactions is also called as the carbon fixation cycle. So ang second part, dito ra mahitabo sa bundle sheath cells. So what are bundle sheath cells? So this is the typical plant tissue. We have pangalan. We have the spongy mesophyll here, and then the vascular tissue, and then the bundle sheath cells. But the bundle sheath cells are actually not protected. Okay? Dili sila protected. Open dinhi, open diha, ayan. Through the, pangalan yan, the spaces here in the spongy mesophyll. But in these plants, called as the C4 plants, where bundle sheath cells, this one, bundle sheath cells are actually, pangalan yan, guarded by the mesophyll cells. So, kaning mesophyll cells, ang ilang himuon kay, they accumulate, bombard, pangalan yan, carbon dioxide here in the bundle sheath cells so that photorespiration cannot occur. Yan. So the bundle sheath cells contain all the plant's RUBP carboxylase enzymes. So dinhira mahitabo ang carbon fixation. So the pangalan yan, asa na ba ta? These bundle sheath cells are actually protected from air, from oxygen, and surrounded by a specialized layer of mesophyll cells. So tungod ani nga mesophyll cells dili makasud ang oxygen kay di ba dinhi man na moagi dinhi sa imong stomata or stoma. Stoma is singular, stomata is plural, and then yes, so mahimong exposed ni siya dinhi to oxygen, which is prone to photorespiration. So ayon, tungod aning mesophyll cells nga nakapalibot sa imong bundle sheath cells, so dili makaadto ang oxygen sa imong rubisco, the enzymes used for carbon fixation. So the mesophyll cells use energy harvested by their chloroplasts to pump carbon dioxide into the bundle sheath cells so that mahimo na nga high ang concentration sa carbon dioxide dinhi sa imong RUBP carboxylase. So meaning dili na pangalan yan, kung daghan na ang concentration sa carbon dioxide compared to oxygen, so dili na maglibog ang imong rubisco kuhaon na to niya tong carbon dioxide, di ba? Osmosis, diffusion, di ba? The CO2 pumping plants are called as C4 plants. So why are they called as C4 plants? Because in order for them to pump this carbon dioxide, they need to transform it not into a 3-carbon molecule, but into a 4-carbon molecule. So the CO2 is initially captured by converting it to a 4-carbon molecule. So, pangalan dapat na ay 4 carbons. So I need you to watch this link in order for you to better understand the difference between the C3, which are the typical normal plant, cells or tissue, and the C4 plants, those plants that have adaptations for arid and dry conditions. So what are the advantages of C4 plants? CO2 pumping costs energy, but this energy has a lesser energy cost than the energy lost in photorespiration. Diba magsayang-sayang ramang ka og ATP sa photorespiration. So mas maayo pa hinuon sa C4 plant kay naa ka pay ma-produce, diba? Nga carbohydrates. C4 plants also do not open their stoma that often because they can perform photosynthesis at low carbon dioxide concentrations. Therefore, can fix about twice as much as net carbon as C3 plants per unit of water lost. So, kaduhaon ang kaya nila nga ma-produce nga kanang nga carbon or ma-fix nga carbon kaysa sa mga C3 plants relative to the water that is lost through evaporation by opening up these stomata. So what are some examples of C3 plants? So C3 plants are the evergreen trees, deciduous trees, weedy plants, and grasses. So like for example, rice, wheat, cowpea, peanut, soybeans, sunflower, man siguro ni siya, and the big trees, diba? These are actually C3 plants. So imagine what would happen if there is an increased global warming, diba? So the photosynthetic capability of the C3 plants will also be decreased, hampered. Then, what are some examples of C4 plants? That is the reason why, diba, we plant corn kapag summer because it's too hot. And, or kapag dito sa mga areas where there is less water because they can survive and they are better adapted to higher temperatures and more efficient sila to usage of water. Na hindi siya nawawaste in evaporation because of just opening its stomata frequently. So some examples are sugarcane, corn, crabgrass, and pearl millet. Um, yes, yeah, that's it for this discussion. So I hope that you can now be able to distinguish what a chloroplast is, what a mitochondrion is, ano pa ba? And also, what are their similarities? Similarities, di ba? What their origins are, what their functions are, what are their components. Because these informations will be useful in the mechanistic na mga pangalan yan, discussions in the next sessions. Okay, so I hope you learned something for today. Um, I think that would be all. And if you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to just chat me in the group chat. Okay, so that is all for this discussion. Thank you for listening.